You're listening to the Wild Paw Dog Podcast with Karen Wilde and John Buskell, recorded February the 7th, 2012. Hello everybody, I'm John Buskell.
And I'm Karen Wilde.
And this is the podcast that gives you help and advice on how to train your dog. It doesn't matter if you're an experienced dog owner, if you've just got your first puppy, or you're thinking about buying a dog. There's something we can all do to make the life we share with our dogs better.
In this week's show, we've got a few ideas about teamwork in dog training. We've also got a little bit about shock collars and the fact that, yes, they hurt.
Well, Karen, I hear that we got a lovely message.
We did. We do get really nice messages, but this one I thought, well, there's a couple I thought I'd mention because, first of all, I'd like to say hello to Bob Ryder.
Hello,
who
Bob.
Sent us hi, Bob. Yeah, and he sent us a really, really lovely message. I'm not going to read it out because it would make me blush. And you blush.
Oh, I like
but
those.
It's really kind. And, Bob is a trainer in Illinois. And he has a 10-month-old yellow lab called Daisy. And he's basically saying, keep up the good work. And he's also asked when the next podcast is because he's just contacted me on Facebook the other day. So here we are, Bob. I'm sorry about the delay. And also, I'd really like to say hello to Gracie Dodwell, who is a Goldie. And she is coming on my next puppy class course. And apparently she is a listener as well. So hello, Gracie. And I can't wait to meet you.
Oh, that's lovely. Hello, Gracie. And thank you, Bob, as well. That's really sweet. So when does your next puppy class start then, Karen?
The next one we start on the 10th of March. The reason we've had a bit of a gap is because we haven't finished this one just yet. We'll finish that one next week. Then we've got a gap because the hall that I use, it's a really good venue and it's not available for a couple of weeks. So I just thought it would be better. Now, it does mean that the people are having to wait a little bit longer, but to be honest, they're such sensible people and they've all been socialising their puppies like mad. So, it will be nice to just get them all together and do a bit more formal training now that their puppies are a little bit older. So, 10th of March it'll be. We've still got 2 spaces, I think, at the moment, but that's all. So if anyone's local and they've got a puppy, then give us a ring.
All right, Karen, let's get into the main item then. Let's start off with talking about shock collars. Those horrible things.
I know. Do you know what really gets me, John? What really, really gets me is if you say to some people that you don't like the idea of shock collars, they look at you as if you're some kind of namby-pamby, tree-hugging wussy. Not that there's anything wrong with hugging trees, but whatever floats your boat. But, it's a real kind of, oh, you obviously don't really want results then type look. And it really gets on my wick because I kind of think, you don't need to do it that way. There are ways to get results without using pain methods, which is what they are. So let's kind of rewind a little bit. The reason I sort of brought this up is because I do get asked a lot of the time by people about, should I get a shock collar for my dog? It looks like it works on television and, is it going to stop my dog running away? Is it going to stop my dog chasing sheep? Is it going to stop my dog doing things that I don't want it to do? Barking, that sort of thing. As if it's kind of a one-size-fits-all item that, you can pay your money and get one. And is there a good one to get? And is there a bad one to get? And it's almost like it's in the public consciousness, is that word? As something that we would naturally want to use. And it doesn't, just because I don't use them doesn't mean to say that anyone else can't use them or anything like that. But I don't think that they are necessary at all. The usual argument is something along the lines of, well, you just wave a biscuit at the dog. That's not going to make it obey. Well, no, of course it's not going to make it obey. And I don't think any good trainer that I know would even attempt to try and stop a dog doing something for a biscuit. It just shows to me a complete misunderstanding of what training is all about. So,
Sorry, I was going to say, in terms of my consciousness of shock collars, last 10, 12 years, I don't remember them when I was a kid growing up or... No, they're relatively recent things. I think... I did used to see a lot more choke chains and the occasional prong collar, which I know is quite prevalent in the US as well, which is really sad. But now people won't use a choke chain.
They won't use a prong collar because they look and are barbaric, but they would use a shock collar because they're told, it's marketed, that it is some kind of tingle on the dog, and somehow this tingle is supposed to communicate to the dog that whatever it is not right for doing. It needs to do something else, but they don't actually communicate that there's something else available. I think my issue is, it would be like, I think I said to one of my class members the other day about, it would be rather like me punching you in the face every time you got something wrong, and I'm pretty powerful because I do karate, so I could punch pretty hard. But would it actually teach you not to do whatever it is I wanted you to do? Or would it just make you absolutely terrified of me? And every time that situation arose again, looking at me with fear, going, well, are you going to punch me? So, and I must hasten to stress, I don't teach anyone by punching them in the face.
Can we just define what we mean by shock collar? Are they these things that sort of, it's not like a taser, but it's like it sprays lemon in the dog's face?
No, that is a spray collar. So they're slightly different. Well, they're all to do with a way of making the dog be revolted by whatever it is that's happening to it. And assuming that the dog associates the things correctly, then it would say, the idea is, oh, well, I was just doing that and that wasn't very nice on my neck, so therefore I won't do that behaviour again.
So it's operant conditioning?
It would kind of be, yeah, I guess so. But the idea of a shock collar is it's actually an electric collar, yes. And it has two prongs that sit into the dog's fur and poke into its neck. And if you look at them, they're quite a decent size. I mean, they're not little, and it's quite obvious to spot. They're quite easy to see that the dog's got it on. And on the inside, it's like, as I say, two kind of conductor bits, and there's a shock goes across them. So effectively, yes, I suppose I don't know much about tasers, but the principle is the same. It zaps them. And it zaps the dog's neck. And if you really have a mind to decide whether you think they hurt or not, there is lots of evidence to show that, yes, they do. And the behaviour that a dog exhibits is pain behaviour. And there are lots of videos on YouTube of people putting them on themselves. And, that they are quite frightening to watch, because these people think it's a joke and they're laughing away and they're going, oh, look, I'll turn it up to 1. Oh, that hurt. Oh, I'll turn it up to 3. Oh, that hurt. And they turn it up to 8, and they literally can't speak for a few seconds. And then they start ripping at the collar to try and get it off. So if that's the way that you want to train your dog, then that is not, to me, a way of, it's not an intelligent way of doing it, put it that way. So and that sounds patronising, but I don't mean it like that. I mean, there are much, much easier, better, long-term, nice ways of training.
Yeah, we've put it out there, Karen. The Wild Paw Dog Podcast. Say no to shock collars.
Say no to shock collars. They're banned in Wales. They're illegal in Wales. You can buy them over here if you really desperately want to, but hopefully they will be banned soon as well, because they're just so unnecessary. I don't feel like I've explained why. I think what I should explain is that if you have a dog that is behaving in a certain way, say, for example, it's barking at another dog, and you somehow want to stop it doing that, what you really should be thinking of is, first of all, why it's barking. So is it afraid? Is it excited? Does it not see many dogs in the first place? Those kinds of reasons need to come to the fore. So you get someone, if you can't be bothered to do it yourself, get someone who knows what they're doing to sort of say, well, the dog's this, that and the other. If you use a shock collar on a dog like that, or a spray collar or anything else, to be fair, the problem, or a choke chain even, the problem is that the dog doesn't only associate the sight of the other dog with whatever it's feeling and bark as a result. It then associates some kind of pain alongside that problem. So you might have a dog that's jumping up at people in the street, and then you zap it in the apparent sort of way of, oh, I'm going to stop it doing that. Then the dog will start to fear people, because it then thinks, every time I get anywhere near that person, I get a zap on the neck. So it's not necessarily going to stop jumping. It might still jump and then get zapped every time. But it's certainly not going to be looking forward to people being around it.
And can create new problems.
It does create new problems. I mean, I can speak from experience here that I do see dogs that have had methods like this used on them where, they've not been necessary, and it's usually quite a young dog as well. It's terrible. I mean, under 1, and I'm not saying older is better, but a puppy even that hasn't been on the planet long enough to learn that much, and it's probably only been to like 10 lessons, and that's it. And they get desperately distressed. And they form associations all on their own. So they will see a person and start to panic, start to worry, which might make them bark more. It might make them pull more. It might make them run away more. And I get the legacy of that, unfortunately. And I have to sort of ask the client, what have they been doing? And it's come down to a basic misunderstanding of what the dog actually needs. So it's not namby-pamby to say no to a shock collar. It's a sensible decision. Yes, there is no quick fix. There isn't. Even with a shock collar, there is no quick fix. It subdues the dog, it hurts the dog, and that's it. So if you want better ways, there are lots of better ways. Get a decent instructor who will help you with a better way. That's my soapbox moment.
I mean, I can hear some people might be going, oh, well, Karen's talking about, getting an instructor to help you with these things, but not everyone can put resources into that. So is there something that, what would you suggest that they start reading if they wanted to look for things under what sort of...
Well, I think that's a good question, because there's an awful lot on the internet that you may and may not want to see. There are some excellent resources on the internet for things like how to train. YouTube is a great resource for clicker training, for positive food lure reward training, and for solving problems. It doesn't have to be, oh, well, this is a cute little puppy and it hasn't learnt anything yet. You could have a big, bad problem that could quite easily be dealt with by somebody on YouTube in a humane, non-punishment way. And let's face it, when I say non-punishment, I don't mean that you're not punishing the dog at all. What you're not using an aversive like a shock collar. What you're using is a punishment can be loss of freedom. It can be, I'm sorry, dog, you've got to do it anyway. You've got to sit. You've got to, without physically getting heavy with the dog. And, it's not punishment free, but punishment can be you're not having whatever it is you want to have. So if they're barking in frustration because they want to get to the other dog, you have to somehow ride that curve of letting them get a reward of getting closer to the other dog for the behavior you want. It's not rocket science. It's easy.
I think the other thing we have to say is that, when you start looking at things on YouTube and seeing results, and you've got to use just because you see something working there as well. I think this is where it does come down to the fact of, if you are in doubt, if you feel that there is a problem with your dog, you have to talk to someone who is, qualified, and that qualification is a legitimate qualification. I mean, here in Sweden, we have certain qualifications. I'm sure you do in the UK and the States, they do. It's important. And I know from the statistics from the podcast that we get downloads from all around the world. Make sure if you've got a problem, if you can't, I don't want to say, there is no quick fix. And sometimes we have to face it, just like we take our kids to the doctor or we take ourselves along to talk to a professional. Am I making sense here, Karen?
Yeah. I'm agreeing with you as you're saying it. I mean, I think you're right. I think resources are limited, especially at the moment. Everyone's tightening their belts a little bit, but we have a responsibility to our dogs. And say you'd pay however much for a shock collar, you might as well spend your money on a decent trainer. It doesn't take much to get somebody to assess. If they know what they're doing, they'll assess what's going on and they will tell you what you need to be doing. Now, that's something that you can then take away and do for yourself. If they're in tune with what you want, they should be able to communicate to you, well, okay, this is what the dog wants, this is what you want, let's try and work it together. Which brings me on to our next topic for today.
Aha, so you're going to tell us about your skiing trip, are you, Karen?
No, not my skiing trip. Well, I could tell you about my skiing trip, and I could frighten everyone by showing them my amazing bruise that I got from getting off the ski lift on my snowboard and sitting on it.
But this is a clean podcast. This is a clean podcast.
No, not that sort of. Honestly, some people. No, I have a jolly big bruise on the back of my thigh. Nowhere else. Because I kind of sat down in an effort to get away from somebody who was standing in the way. They'd just fallen off the ski lift, and I was trying to steer past them. And I'd left my bindings of the snowboard sticking up. So as I sort of sat in an effort to steer my snowboard out of the way, I sort of sat on it and sat on the binding and really banged into my thigh with this curved binding. So I've got like this crescent bruise that's about 4 inches long. It's just amazing. But I'm sort of, badge of honor and all that. But no, it was really good fun. I mean, I can ski after a fashion, and I was learning to snowboard for the first time. And yes, I know I'm 40 and I should be sensible, but that's boring. And I really wanted to snowboard. So, so what? I had lessons with a really good instructor.
And this does tie in with dogs, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, he needed to be a patient instructor with me because, it really brought home to me how much, when I'm teaching someone or when someone is teaching their dog, how patient you have to be and how aware you have to be of what is happening as part of the team. So it's teamwork. It's always teamwork. I do get a lot of people that will blame themselves and say, well, it's probably my fault because the dog's not doing this and the dog's not doing that. And it's all my fault. And, really blaming themselves and feeling quite bad about the whole thing. But I won't allow that, because what I say to them is, yeah, you are the person and you are one half of a team. The dog is the other half of the team and they are a dog. And I don't need to point out to you that dogs don't see the world in the same way that we do. And sometimes we don't realize how incredibly strong their instincts are for hunting, sniffing, those scavenging, those kinds of things that just make them into the really nice animals that they are. So, when you are teaching, you have to see yourself as a team. You are the teacher and the dog is the student. For some things like formal training. So if you're teaching your dog to walk nicely on a lead, they're not instinctively going to do that. They're not instinctively going to sit for you when you lift your hand and tell them a word in whatever language you choose. So that's your teaching part. Then it turns itself on its head. So if the dog is doing something with its body language, if it's showing signals to you, then it is teaching you about what it wants and what it doesn't want. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the dog gets everything it wants, and neither do you. But if you're seeing something that you're doing, or as a direct result of something going by, for example, like a train or something that your dog is slightly nervous about, your dog is teaching you with its body language that it actually is slightly nervous of that. And so part of your team effort is to try and get the dog used to it if that's something it's going to come into contact with regularly. So that's the kind of relationship that you should be having. Does that make sense? It's got to be balanced.
Absolutely. I mean, I do think that, there is a lot of pressure on dog owners, new dog owners and experienced dog owners alike. Whether you're taking on a rescue dog or a puppy, you have the responsibility to nurture and guide that dog into, to socialize it into the world and to give it the tools to be able to navigate all the things that it will come up against in its life, whether it's going to the vets, whether it's meeting other dogs. You are the person that's training that. A dog is not born with the tools to cope with everything. So I do think teamwork is. I think that's. I mean, isn't there one of the key dog one of the more well-known dog trainers out there who talks about working together with your dog?
I think there's a lot of. I mean, all trainers should be talking about working together with your dog. I do think there's a heavy emphasis sometimes, particularly on some of the television programs. And I don't include Victoria Stilwell in this because I think her programs are great. But there are one or two where they will say, "Oh, you're not being the leader, and you're not, bossing the dog around too much." And then therefore the owner then blames themselves entirely for what's going on and feels very disempowered. And I think that's absolute rubbish. I think that, you have to be in charge in situations where your dog could get itself into trouble. Yes, you do. But you're not this dictator that it comes across, in on the telly. I mean, you're not a dictator. You are a guardian. You are responsible for your dog. You're legally responsible for what they do. So it's up to you to make sure the dog doesn't do stupid things that we might consider to be dangerous, but they sometimes will.
One of the leading Swedish trainers, who's very well known, and she's very much associated with mjuk metod. We have this hard and soft kinds of training, and mjuk, soft. This is the kind of training that we're talking about here. The kind of supportive. And she published a book, and it's been translated, I think, into English. I was offered the chance to do it, but my prices were too expensive. Contact Contractet, which in English translates as the contact contract, which I think is a lovely way of describing the relationship between owner and dog, that it's a contract of contact, and that contract, by purchasing or taking on a dog, it is a contract of support, of training, of teaching, of nurturing, of play, all those kind of things.
And as well of allowing your dog from time to time to just be themselves. I think we are put under a lot of pressure, and I think that's absolutely spot on what you said, because we are expected to have these immaculate sort of creatures, and they aren't going to be like that, and the more and more pressure that you put on a dog, the harder the dog finds life generally. So you do have to train it. You do have to have boundaries. Absolutely, you do. And you have to make sure that those boundaries they're strict. But if you overdo it, you will have a dog that gets very, very stressed, very frustrated, very, defensive all the time. And that is a problem in itself. So you've got to get the balance right. And when people talk about balanced dogs on the television in particular, that's not what they're describing. What they're describing with a balanced dog, say, for example, in The Dog Whisperer, when he says about balance, yeah, they need more exercise. Yes, absolutely they do. But balance is not punishment in the sense of like pinning them to the ground. Did you hear that?
Yeah, what was that?
Piano? That's my cat Button. That made me jump.
Yeah, me too. I'm thinking, gosh, that's a very cool ring signal. Everbaldfeld. I've sent you the link, Karen, for Everbaldfeld, so you can put it in the show notes. It's called "Follow Me: A Deal with Your Dog" in English, the translation. So
a deal with your dog is good. I like that. I think it is a deal. I'm going to have to remove my cat from the piano.
That's okay. We'll pause it. Now bring it back to the skiing, Karen. How does it tie in with the skiing?
Well, I was saying I was learning to snowboard, and one of the things I was really aware of was that it was a physical skill, and it can be really tough learning a new physical skill. And training is effectively a physical skill, which is why I always look for people who have hands-on experience when I'm looking for a trainer. It goes into your head as a human, and then it kind of follows down through to your arms and your legs and your voice and those sorts of things that follow. And there's a delay, and that is true for us, and it's almost certainly going to be true for dogs as well. There has to be this kind of time catch up where what you've communicated or what you're understanding you have to do then is transmitted to your teammate. So if you're training a dog, it's going to take you a minute to assess what the instructor is telling you or what you've read in the book or whatever, and then await a reaction. And then looking for that reaction in your dog while their brain then processes what's going on, and then they react as well. So to begin with, you're going to need a lot of patience, because your dog is going to be looking at you going, what on earth are you talking about? Why are you making that noise? Why is your hand moving like that? That is why, I was thinking about it with my instructor when I was learning to snowboard, saying, do this, try and sit on your heels when you want to slow down, then go on your toes, then turn. And I'm falling over and going, I don't, my head knows what to do. So there is a thing about childcare where if you're teaching a young child, statistically, they show that it takes a young child, it's something like 11 seconds or 15 seconds or something for that child to actually process and operate on what you've just said to them. And that depends on familiarity. And it also depends on how desirable the action is, I'm sure. But if it's a brand new action, that's what's been shown. So give your dog a chance to catch up. Give them a chance to work out what you are on about.
I mean, it's a bit like being, I call it getting mentally set. If you're going into a learning exercise, you have to be in the right frame of mind. You have to be mentally set to learn. And in this kind of training situation with the dog, you as the trainer have to be mentally set. But you can't explain that concept to a dog. So you have to get the dog into a position where they're ready to work with you. So, I mean, otherwise you're setting the dog up for failure, aren't you?
You are, and I mean, it's not the end of the world if you do fail. I mean, we all fail with our dogs, and we all make mistakes and regret what we've just done, and that happens. But you kind of have to put it on almost like a mental chart. It's another of our scientific chart brain operation things to take the emotion out of the situation. Think pluses and minuses. You want a page of pluses if you can get it. If you can't get a page of pluses, you want a page of pluses and maybe one minus, and that's it. The more minuses you're getting, you're going to have to change something you're doing because you're not doing it right. And I don't believe that any dog, unless they are stressed beyond belief or don't actually want what you've got to offer, which does happen, and there are ways of getting them to want what you've got on offer. So, don't panic if that is your dog. To get them in a situation where they are going to succeed. And, so there's a little game that I kind of want to leave everybody with, which is a game that I play in my puppy classes for everyone that comes in, because the first week we normally say, don't bring the puppy. I've got to teach you first. So what I do is I write, and you can do this at home as well. It's really, really good. You get somebody to write out a list of colours. So 3 colours, any colours you want. and have them as commands. So red would be a command, blue would be another command, yellow would be another command. And then you write on next to each command what you want that person's actions to be as a result of that command. So you give the piece of paper to the trainer. You don't show it to the person who's going to act as the dog. So you have two people. One is the trainer, one is the so-called dog, if that makes sense. The trainer is not allowed to speak other than giving the commands and saying good dog or yes. And then you can have a clicker if you... Is that Aggie?
Yeah.
In the background. I can hear her. She sounds like she's rubbing her ears in her...
You are.
So one person is the trainer. They're not allowed to speak in any other way. So you have to assume that, just like dogs don't really understand your language. They might understand your tone and they might pick bits up. But this exercise is about training you to train something or someone. So then you have to somehow convey to that person what those commands are. I did a similar thing when I did my dog training education, that we were given clickers and Aggie. She sounds like she's totally... I know. It's the stitches. She's got stitches. So I'll tell you a bit about that later. We did this game where you're given a clicker and some treats, and you would be given an instruction like, okay, you've got the clicker and you're told to shape me into a position where I'm sitting on the ground. And then you realize how difficult it is to communicate. And do you know the classic thing that everybody does? I don't, obviously, the person who's behaving as the dog, if you like, they don't have to be a dog. They're just being trained. They aren't allowed to know what's going to happen. So they don't know what command means. All they keep hearing, or eventually what they'd hear, is red, which has no meaning at all. Unless they think that you want you to point at something red, which is unlikely. They know the rules pretty much. But what quite often happens is that the trainer starts to get the person to try and copy. So what they'll do is they'll wave at them. If say red equals wave, get the person to wave, the trainer will wave at the person and the person will mimic. But that is surely a very primate-based, behavior. Mimicry is something that dogs don't do with people. Otherwise, we would teach dogs by sitting down. If we taught a dog to sit, we would sit down ourselves. That's what we would do. So it doesn't work like that. And equally, it doesn't work where you want a dog to sort of copy something you're doing. If you point with your hand towards something, the dog's likely to look at your hand rather than look into the distance. Unless you can teach them to do that, eventually they understand, oh, you mean look over there. So that is why it's so tricky, but it is hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. And what if you just say, right, no other words but command and clicker, then it's a major challenge. So I'd say go, if you've got a new puppy or if you've got an older dog and you're listening to the podcast and you want to have a bit of fun, get a third party to write out some commands so none of you know what they are, and then just try and teach them without talking. And you can only say, if you haven't got a clicker or you don't use clicker, you can only say yes. That's it. You can't say no. Or you could say no if you wanted, if you're desperate. But it's better if you just concentrate on that and see how you do it. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. You're allowed to touch them. I would say that. You are allowed to touch the person, and you're allowed to lure them. So, wafting 20-pound nose works extremely well. Well, Karen, I think what we're saying here is teamwork is best. Teamwork is absolutely best. You've got to think of it in perspective. The dog wouldn't do things if it weren't a dog. You wouldn't do things without being a person. And somehow you've got to communicate with each other. And, at some point, one of you is going to fail. So it's not always going to be you. It's not always going to be the dog. So you're not allowed to blame yourself. You're not allowed to blame the dog. It's just part of the team. Samspel. In Swedish, samspel. Spel is very close to the word for mirror. And it's like you are mirroring each other, and the calmness that you bring to the training will be reflected in the calmness that you will shape and bring out in your dog. I think that's a way of mirroring each other as a team. Well, Karen, I think that we need to wrap things up here a bit. We've been going on for about our half an hour spot. Already? Exactly. Gosh. So before we go, I just wanted to bring up a little something here. Aggie was diagnosed with skin cancer about 3 weeks ago. I found over the weekend she'd had a sebaceous cyst in her skin, and my vet had looked at it in November and said, no, it's nothing, it's just a sebaceous cyst. And then about 3-4 weeks ago, it suddenly over the weekend, it went to the size of a tennis ball.
And of course, I was very worried, took it into the vets, and they, of course, took it out. And both my vet and veterinary surgeon were like, well, we've never seen anything like this before. And it turned out to be cancerous. And then she had 5 other growths on her that they found, and they took all these, and these proved, thankfully, to be they were benign. They weren't cancerous. And I talked to the pathologist, the oncologist at the Royal Veterinary Hospital here in Sweden, and this kind of cancer is very, very treatable. If you find a lump in your dog's skin, it's very important to get it checked out, because skin cancers in dogs are just as important as like human skin cancers. However, the good thing is that it's very, very rare that these cancers spread rapidly. So it's really important, if you find a lump, to get it checked. And, I'm hoping that Agsy will be around here for a lot longer. She's done very well. She looks a bit like Quasimodo at the moment, where she's had all these lumps cut out. It was quite poor
Agsy. Yeah. I can see on the webcam here, because we always chat to each other on webcam for the podcast. Fact fans, if you're interested. And I could hear Agsy, but I couldn't see her, and I just saw this basset tail.
Come on,
wafting along. I'm sitting here with Bonnie on the lap, so you know. Oh, there she is. Oh, poor thing. Of course, we'll have to publish a picture of Aggie now, because people will be wanting to see what she looks like.
Very lazy.
Yeah, so, and, you know, thanks for catching up on a podcast as well. I know we've both been busy. I mean, you've obviously been busy, with Aggie, and I know you've done various things like head banging into trains and stuff.
Here to record another day.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Exactly. So let's wrap things up then, Karen. As I've had my thing.
I can't believe it's been half an hour already. I should just mention my book, by the way, before I go.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Yes, tell everyone about your exciting book.
Well, there's so much to tell. We'd be here all day, but it's not going to be published as soon as I thought, because various reasons, but that aren't sort of in my control. But I have got 3 books that are ready to publish at the moment. One is a green light, and it will be coming out October, which is great. The other 2 just need a few editing tweaks and things like that, and then we're going to be working on those. So hopefully one will be out towards the end of the year, but we should have a couple out before that. So
what's the one going to be called? The one that's out before the end of the year?
I'm not allowed to say.
The world according to Karen and dogs.
No, it's a very sensible, straightforward pet care type book, which is what we need, with lots of ideas about basic things to get your dog really, what it needs, what it wants, and how you can provide it easily, and that's really my angle. That's the way that I try and do things, because we're all busy. We haven't all got lots and lots of hours to devote to our dogs. I know some of us do, but speaking for myself, no, I have a lot of time for my dogs, but I don't have a lot of time, if that makes sense. So all of my writing is aimed at that, is to try and make everybody understand how easy it can be, and if you've got a problem, how easy it is to find help, and it doesn't mean you're stupid if you're having a problem. It's just that it's probably so close to you that you can't see it, can't see the wood for the trees, and it's all about making life better for all of us. And I think it sounds really schmaltzy and sickening, but it is true. That is what I really want. So.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, that's like we say with the show, there's something we can all do to make the life we share with our dogs better. I mean, I think that's something that both you and I, really believe in.
Yeah, and I think everyone who, the people in my puppy classes, for example, they are terrific. They're so friendly to each other. I really push that, and it's made some terrific dogs out of it. We've got some lovely ones coming through, and that makes my life happy as well, because obviously they're all in our community. So, your dogs are getting on better with everyone. So that's great. I like that. I feel like I'm achieving a goal then.
So if you have any comments about the show or questions, please get in touch. You can contact Karen on Twitter, and her Twitter handle is twitter.com/wildpaw. You'll find her if you tweet to wildpaw. Mine is twitter.com/John Buskell, or you can email us at podcast@intellidogs.com. We would really love it if you wrote us a review over on iTunes. And if you're looking for more in-depth training advice before Karen's books come out, why not go along to her website at intellidogs.com and put together your own tailored training manual to help you and your dog. If you'd like to inquire about web design or online marketing services that I offer, come along to my website, and that's jontusmedia.com, JONTUS media.com. And so until next time, Karen, be nice to our woofs.
Be nice to your woofs.